Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, Money, Motivation and Performance, a Conversation Guide. Talking about money, talking about whether it's performance-related pay, whether it's bonuses, whether it's pay rises. We know that it's always a challenge for you, and that is one of the questions that we get asked most in all the conversations that we have with people. So today's session, I'll be sharing with you some tips around how you might want to talk about performance, how you might want to talk about money, and from then on we'll be going through lots of different techniques. You can ask questions as we go, and we'll keep you all on mute during the recording. As always, at the end of the session I will switch the recording off, give everybody the opportunity to unmute, and then we can have conversations about any particular things you're facing. So just for a moment, here's my face. For those of you who haven't seen me, I'm going to put this on speaker view. So delighted to welcome you all. And I know some of you are new faces and some of you are more experienced faces coming here. So really, really pleased to see you all. All right, let's go back and just do a little bit of a share. And you can just, for those of you who haven't seen this before, I'll just give a little bit of a background. So let me share this screen. So for those of you who don't know us, these are typical of our clients, and we tend to work with organisations where people have been promoted on the basis of their professional, technical or academic expertise, whether that's in a university or a technology company or a financial services company, and not working with people who, or we are working with people who maybe don't have great people skills. So what I'm going to share today are these key things around, the challenge about pay satisfaction, job satisfaction, what that means for your conversations, helping you understand your own fears about discussing money, and thinking about those tricky situations when it's not fair, and maybe even you agree that it's not fair, but you can't do something. And at the end of the webinar, we have, courtesy of Pearson, a very special offer around a discount on my book, which I'm going to have a moment of humble brag. I discovered yesterday that my book has been nominated for the Business Book Awards, so that's a really exciting moment for me to find that out. So I'm just going to mute you all. I'm getting a little bit of background noise there. All right, so let's move on. So pay and job satisfaction. I want you to think about people who you know who really love their jobs, and people who you know who put up with not enjoying their work in order to take home a salary. And you may know people who love their jobs and are happy with their salary, but I think many of us know people who are in a different situation to that, who really enjoy their jobs, but perhaps are not so well paid, whether that's in the private sector, in the public sector, or in the NGO. It's classic in some of the NGO sectors that people accept working for a lower salary than they might command elsewhere, but feel very good about the work that they're doing. So when you are thinking about job satisfaction and how happy people are if you are a manager, you need to separate out in your mind, are people satisfied with their pay or are they satisfied with their work? And if people are satisfied with their pay but not their work, one of your challenges is they might underperform, because if they don't really like their job, all their natural motivation to do their job well fades away, and money can only be a very short-term bribe. If you have people who really enjoy their work but are frustrated by the lack of income and would like more, your risk is not that those people will underperform. They're doing their job because they really want to do their job. Your risk is more that you will lose them, because in the end, the need for money will affect their decisions. So it's also worth thinking that 2022 has started off as what's been known as the Great Resignation, and many, many people in the HR space we know are talking about how impossible it is to recruit at every level, from kind of senior director right down to frontline staff. And pay is part of that, but so is job satisfaction, particularly job satisfaction around my commute to work, the flexibility that I have, whether or not I feel welcome. Lots of other things are affecting our motivation. So when we are sitting there about to have a conversation about money and we're worried about demotivating people, you need to separate out in your mind that money is not the main motivator. On the right-hand side, though, there are absolutely challenges, that there are people working in what's so-called the gig economy, many of whom would prefer the security of regular work because that enables them to plan their lives in a different way. That enables them to plan things socially. It enables them to plan things financially. So, oh, thank you, Rita. I've just seen your note about getting the book nominated. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Sorry, little distraction there. Other people are choosing, as we've said, to make job choices based around all sorts of things other than money. So what does this really mean for some of the conversations that you have? I'd like us to understand how money drives our choices as well as our behaviors, all right? So we can have choices about whether we pick pockets and rob banks, or whether we work hard in banks themselves, whether we work only on commission. There are lots of different ways in which our need for money drives the choices that we make. And our individual attitudes to money are hugely varied. And one of the other challenges that we need to remember is that your attitude to money is not the same as the person that you're talking to, and that our attitudes to money have been hugely affected by our personal circumstances and our upbringing. So I'm not going into it in detail here, but in the book, I do give a little model for understanding the emotional value of money. We have got it in the slides. I think it's on the next slide coming up. Let's have a quick look at that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because this is a very simple model. But what it shows is that if you've been brought up in a household with significant money worries, you could react in very different ways to that, from being very anxious about money yourself to feeling that actually every penny you've got above the absolute poverty line brings you a sense of abundance and comfort. So if you have a lot of money worries, you might react to it very differently. And similarly, if you've been brought up in a household with very few money worries, in fact, where money was plentiful, you might be one of those people who never worries, but you might also feel enormous pressure to be able to deliver that level of wealth into your family, into your life. So don't assume that because people are well paid, they don't have money worries, because money worries are an emotional response to money and not a rational response to money. So again, when you're thinking about how to talk about money, it would be very helpful to you if you've already had a conversation with people about their emotional reaction to it. There's a lot more on conversation guide around this in the book, which you could find, but you're welcome to have this little model and start yourself thinking along these areas. So moving on. How does money impact performance? We are very well used to hearing all of these things, aren't we, around, oh, if I can't give somebody a bonus, how can I motivate them? A lot of the work I do in the public sector, managers will say to me, well, if only I had the money that Google had, you know, I'd be able to motivate anybody. Well, I think there are two things there. First of all, lots of people in the private sector would wish that they had the money that Google has. So just because you're working in the private sector, I know, doesn't mean you've got oodles of money to throw about. But the challenge that you face, whether you're in the public or the private sector, is it's not the money that drives individual behavior. So I've given many webinars on these subjects before. I've tackled them at length in the book. High performance comes from core three behaviors, one of which is conscientiousness, which I think we can know as hard work, just doing what you'll say you'll do. Another one comes from what's known technically as emotional stability, but that really means it's about persistence and resilience. It's about people who, no matter how difficult things get, are able to keep going. It's also about people who don't throw their toys out the pram every time things go wrong and dump their emotions over everybody else. And finally, one of the most powerful drivers of performance is the ability to learn from experience. Now, money doesn't really change any of those behaviors. You know, money does not make me more persistent. You can't offer me a bonus over the year to say, will you be more persistent? Persistence is a behavior that I've learned, and I can't just switch it on. If I'm not a persistent and resilient person, I can't magically become one just because you're offering me some money. I actually need a different set of things that will encourage me to develop that behavior. And personal motivation, we've used Dan Pink's language here. I'm very fond of Dan Pink. We use this language of mastery, autonomy, purpose, but we know that personal motivation comes from the desire to be an expert, the desire to excel, and the desire for that recognition of how I've excelled. And I'm going to touch on in a minute. Money is one way of measuring how successful I am. And to that extent, money can say, yes, you're a success. And so it's a reward, but it's not a motivator. Money doesn't make me excel at things. I excel at things. And then the money is what shows me that I'm recognized for doing that. We all want autonomy. Money does not give me autonomy. You know, if I work on commission only sales, for example, I'm actually working for myself, not from an organization. So money does not change my level of autonomy. And yet autonomy is one of the things that we know motivates. And what is my personal purpose at being at work? Now, we absolutely know, we'll talk, that Frederick Hertzberg and all his work around money is a hygiene factor. I need enough money to survive, whatever that might be in the situation that I'm in. But once I've got that money, that amount of money, more money doesn't change my motivation. So my purpose in coming to work, usually, and in accepting a role with the employer, will include, does this money that's on offer meet my primary level of meet what I need to meet? And if it does, then more money isn't going to change my motivation. If it doesn't, I'm more likely, even while I'm working for you, to be looking for another role. So money impacts our performance only to the extent that it allows us to measure and show off to other people what we've done. Little story here. Many years ago, I had to do a little bit of work with Goldman Sachs, which is not something that I would normally, a client that I would usually be working with. And during one of the meetings that I was having, one of the people said, I need to step out. And I was told in hushed voices that if this person closed the deal, his personal bonus from this would be £12 million. And very interestingly, he came back, and when I relayed this to my family at home, one of my children said, if he just earned £12 million, why is he going to work anymore? And I had to explain that it wasn't really the money, it was the measure of how successful he was that money was all about. So we need to think carefully about money. So when you are preparing your conversation around money, you need to do all of the stuff around emotional and thinking. And if your organization is using money to drive behavior, be really, really clear about what the behaviors are that you're trying to drive. All right, so now let's look about how money can focus our attention on strategy. So strategy is what the organization is here to do. And I think if any of you have read the book, The 3 Disciplines of Market Leadership, which this is adapted from, you know that there are essentially 3 core strategies for winning in the marketplace. One around driving costs, one around providing total cost solutions, and one around product information. I'm not going to go into detail on that offer now. If you try and do all 3, you end up in the middle and you lack clarity, your managers lack clarity. So when you are offering bonuses, when you are trying to use money to point attention, you want to focus on your key strategies. So if your key strategy is to drive down costs and be the lowest cost operator in your field, you need to use your variable pay, if that's what you have on offer, in order to achieve that end. So it is use your variable pay to focus people's attention on how to drive down costs. There might be lots of other things that they're doing, but if that's what really matters to you, use your attention in that way, use your money in that way. If you want to want people to focus on what we call here the total solution, the complete customer focus, you want to use your money to help people think and understand about how what they do drives the total solution for the customer. So whether they work in HR or accounting or logistics, or whether they're absolutely on the front line, what is it that people are doing that is absolutely focused on their clients, and how can you use your money to point that way? So money focuses attention on strategy. So some questions for you to ask yourself are, What strategy are we trying to achieve? And how do we focus people's money on it? Now, if you work in the corporate sector, you may say, well, ultimately, we were all here to increase shareholder wealth. Now, my general experience is that most people do not go to work every day to increase shareholder wealth, no matter who they work for, even those people who are working for themselves. They go to work today in order to do something around what they actually have to do that might create shareholder wealth. So whatever your situation, you can't just say, well, I'm here to create more profit, because you might be here to create a stronger balance sheet, or create some more cash flow, or launch a new product, or find some expansion in a marketplace. It's the strategy that you're trying to reward, not the outcome. All right, let's move on. So if your organization is using money to focus strategy, are you making the signals clear? And if you are you ready to have the conversation about, you may have done a great job in this area, in this area, in this area, but our strategy was X, and that's what we're offering our variable pay for. So those are the kinds of things in which you might use money to focus attention and you might want to reward. So we need to remember that money is not a motivator. It is a way to measure things, and it might be measuring lots of things, and I've put some suggestions up here of what it is measuring. So when you are talking about money to your colleagues and you're using money as measure, whether that's a variable pay, whether that's a base salary, whatever it is that you're using, you need to be clear what it is that you are encouraging people to measure as a result of the money. And it might be that you are in effect measuring employee power. You know, how much power is that person? What is their skill scarcity? What would happen if they left? Do you need to use money in order to retain them, even if you don't want to? You know, there are lots of ways in which we use money. So in the last section, I've now finally put up, this is a graphic from the book, and you'll probably read it more clearly in the book than you can read it here, but you will get these slides. So I put up here two versions of a difficult money conversation. So suppose that you're having a conversation with somebody and they are not going to get a pay rise or a bonus that they thought they were promised. And on the other side, the right-hand side, the other challenge is that they found out that colleagues on the same level of them might be being paid more. So you need to think, how am I going to tackle it? So first of all, you need to defuse the emotion, right? People will come into this conversation with an emotional response. So you need to be able to defuse this emotion. So you might find a private space and you need to listen to them first. And if they feel it's unfair, then you can acknowledge, I can see that you feel that's unfair, right? First and foremost, hear it. I understand that this feels very difficult for you. Thank you for letting me know how you feel. Can you clarify facts? Find yourself some useful things that you need to say. And throughout the book, we put actual things that you can say in a conversation. So before you go into a conversation in this way, especially if you know what it's going to be about, make sure you defuse emotion. If you get bounced into this conversation, if you get people who are catch you in a corridor and download all their feelings, the thing to do there is to stay, acknowledge their feelings, and then essentially find somewhere private, maybe then or later, where you can have the conversation. So then you need to have your own rational head on and go, even when you've diffused the emotion and got to their core views, do you feel that their core view is essentially correct? And then if you do feel that it's essentially correct, I've given you, again, on each side of the page, some suggested options. So you might feel, honestly, that you misled them, that they were going to get a bonus. You know, maybe you did. You didn't mean to, but you did. The simplest thing you can do there is acknowledge it and apologize. Yeah? And a lesson learned. It won't make them feel less angry in one way, but there's no point in pretending that you didn't make a mistake. If it's not in your control, you need to explain. You know, it might be that things have changed in the external market and there's less money. It might be that they don't have the resources. It might be any one of the reasons. Try not to blame someone and say, well, I would have given you a bonus, but the senior manager said you couldn't. Right? That's not helpful, because that just sounds like you've got sloping shoulders and you're not taking responsibility for being a manager. So really focus on, being clear as to why something they might have expected is not going to happen. But suppose that their view is essentially not correct. And then you need to do a bit more work unpicking it. So let's come, keeping down the left-hand side, you need to understand why somebody thought this pay rise was coming. What was it that they thought was leading to that? Do they really think they're the best performer and therefore they were going to get the highest bonus? And then you may need to give them some difficult feedback that will reset their perceptions. So again, be clear in your own mind before you go into the conversation. What is the situation? And therefore, what are you going to do about it? And think about what feedback you give. There's a whole chapter in the book on giving feedback. But remember, the simple thing is be clear so you can't be understood. You can't be misunderstood. Don't fudge around it. And then finally, having given them some feedback, are there any options that you have to remedy the situation, either if they were essentially correct or if they weren't? And I've put some suggestions down there around on the left-hand side around possible ways in which you might talk and remedy the situation and try to get your colleague into a positive frame of mind for moving forward. You might have your own. I suggest that, as always, you make your own notes on how this conversation might play out. Let's turn and look at the right-hand side of the screen. So suppose they found that they think they're not being fairly paid. All right, suppose that that's actually basically true. You then need to really take action and go and acknowledge their feelings. So thank you for raising it. I'm not surprised you feel like that. You know, golly, we need to deal with this. Some sort of reaction that acknowledges their feelings. Now, if you are working in effectively an equal opportunity situation where they genuinely are being paid technically less for exactly the same job, you are actually going to have to go away and deal with that and raise it with HR and whoever and sort that out. If it's that they might consider themselves to be doing the same work, but these things are blurred, or maybe someone else, you know, has been in the role a long time and in your organization there are incremental pay rates for years of service, however unfair that may seem, you need to explain to them why the differentials of pay exist, but also think about how you can change that situation. However, it's often the case that they claim that they're doing the same work as someone else or they're as good as someone else, and maybe actually they're not, or maybe it's a very grey area, or maybe they have an inflated sense of just how effective they are. So again, you need to think through, if you can, before the conversation, what are the words you're actually going to say? And it will really help you if you've got those words written down. You may want to practice it with a colleague before you go in and have this conversation, but have yourself some actual words. Otherwise, your emotional reaction to the money will influence the conversation, and they may be having a very different emotional reaction to the situation than you are. So don't imagine that you know what's going on. All right, and then finally, if there aren't options to remedy the situation, and you know, there may not be, sometimes the world is not a fair place. Sometimes you would like to be able to do something for somebody and you can't, and sometimes you realize they're going to go somewhere for more money, and that's what's going to happen because we are where we are in our organization. And I think that you should be able to say, I'm not going to be able to solve this. I can't change this. I understand your feelings. I acknowledge that you're probably right to feel how you are, but this is the situation that we're in. So that if somebody does decide to take the ultimate view and walk, they have had a clear and frank conversation with you, and that at least they can feel that you've been honest and you can feel that you did what you could. They may well need to express all their feelings again, and you need to allow that to happen and just listen. You don't have to answer every objection. I was working in a university last week and they've had some voluntary severance packages going out. And one of them recounted how when offered a voluntary severance package, they were accused of being an instrument of the university. And that as if that was some, you know, Philip Pullman kind of His Dark Materials bad thing. You as a manager don't have to defend your company's policies. You can acknowledge that people feel bad. You don't have to answer every challenge. You just have to acknowledge how people feel. At the same time, it's not helpful to go, well, if I was you, I would leave, all right, or I would do something, but I can't possibly. You need to maintain your level of responsibility and help the person that you're talking to come to a rational conclusion about their action. And if that means discouraging them from taking any action until their emotions have diffused so that they can think through the options, that's often the best thing to do. All right, so I've been through that guide quite a lot. There are lots of different ways of doing it, but I hope that you find in that guide there are some useful sentences that will get you started on thinking about how to have a challenging conversation about money. All right, so the book, very, very exciting news. Yesterday, I think the day before now, I'm losing track of the days, the day before yesterday, we announced that the book was shortlisted for the Business Book of the Year Awards, which is very exciting. There are lots of other conversations in the book that you can use. And also very excited today, Pearson have very kindly offered a month, just about a month, 6 weeks maybe, of a saver code. So if you want to get hold of a copy of the book and you use the copy Save 33 on the Pearson website, you'll be able to get a 33% saving on the book. So that's enough of my promotion about the book. Let's go back to some difficult conversations about money. I'm going to stop the share now. If you have any questions, do put them in the chat. Let me stop the share. There we go. Hope you found that useful. If you've got any questions that you would like to ask, I'm very happy to do that. Do send me a chat message. I am about to stop the recording and then we can have any further questions. Let me just get the recording stopped here. Thank you all very much. If you need to go, we will send the slides later. The recording will be up on YouTube later on. Do feel free to share it. Thank you.